So, we're on verse 186b of Surah Baqarah, pertaining to the verses of fasting. And yesterday, we did the first half of this verse, which is وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ. Okay. And we spoke about the linguistic features of this this passage. So if my servants ask you about me, then I am close. I answer the prayer of the one who prays when or if he calls on me. Then Allah says, فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي. Okay, so the fa, I was a bit curious and sort of caught between what type of fa that was. But I think it's the fa, we could say it's the fa of immediacy or fa of reason, I think here. فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي. So what we've got here is, we've got the verb istajaba, which if you've done the 10 forms course with me, is the last form, the form 10. I think I called it form 9 in the class. Yes, the jibu, and the root is jim waw ba from jawab, same root as ujibu. Istajaba can have the same meaning as ajaba, okay, to answer. But of course it's more emphatic with the addition of the alif and the sin and the ta. That's one. There's another meaning of this verb that means to seek out an answer. Okay. And so that's another possibility here. Now what we've got a form here, obviously it's in the mudari', the imperfect, because we've got the prefix, which is a ya, so we know it's third person. And they've got the waw on the end, so we know it's got a suffix, a waw, that tells me it's masculine plural. But then we've got this lam here. And what's that lam? This is called lam of amr. Okay, lam, which we've seen already twice, at least. In this. Lam of amr. Lam of amr is a lam of command. Okay. And this is used for third person and for first person plural and third person, but not second person in most cases. So it's an invitation. And you've got fa and you've got the li. Usually with the lam of amr, you see it as li yastajibu. But because you've got the fa before it, you put a sukoon on the lam, it becomes fal yastajibu li. So it's an invitation to them. So it's an indirect invitation, because obviously Allah is addressing the servants here in the third person, okay, with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the second person and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being in the first person. So you've got this gradation, Allah first, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam second, and we third, as if we're listening in to this conversation between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي. And so let them respond li, to me. Okay. So the scholars have said here that this فَيَطْلُبُ إِجَابَتِي, they seek out my answer. So, that's very interesting. I didn't even think about that actually. Allah says, I answer, I am close. I answer the call if he calls on me. So let them seek out my answer. Meaning that sometimes when we make a prayer, that the answer or the response, let's say, because there's a difference between the response and attending to someone and actually giving them. Okay. And we're going to look at that. So seek it out, because sometimes it's subtle. We're not sure how Allah's answered. And so that requires us to be curious and open up, and try to really identify how Allah is answering our prayer. And it might not necessarily be in the most obvious and most direct way, but He is in some fashion. Notice how Allah, through the time you've made the dua, until some realization in that request, how that process is taking place and how you're moving towards that objective through seeking out Allah. That's very beautiful, that. So that's one interpretation. The other one is that what this means is that the believer, if he wants his prayer to be answered, he should respond to me. Respond to me in what way? By following my commands, by responding to my call to obey me. Okay, this is another way for our prayers to be answered. Okay, so there's some sort of action that's required from the servant in order for his prayer to be answered, and in acting it occurs. And so it's not a passive practice where we made a prayer and sit and wait. Rather, now engage to seek that out, and you'll see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitate that. Wa alaikum salam. And yeah, he says the response from the slave is obedience, and the response from Allah is that He gives. Okay, so these two are going hand in hand, and so it shows this intricate link between the acts of the servant and the acts of the Lord, and that they are interrelated, and they go in hand in hand. Okay, so it's not what Allah going to do for me. Rather, it's you acting and then seeing as you're through and acting how Allah's responding to your actions. Because in every act, there's an effect. So, فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي, and then Allah says, وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي. It's very interesting. It's connected obviously to this one. So, the fa we said implies rushing to that, or reason. So because of this, do this if you want your prayer to be answered. وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي. So this is the verb آمَنَ. Let me get this right. Yeah, there you go. This is a form 4, or in the 10 forms class I teach it as form 3 actually. It comes from aman, which means security, peace, tranquility, feeling of safety. This is the meanings that this root comes from, and it means to give over your trust. Because one of the meanings of this is a trust, because you give someone because you feel secure in them, that they will look after that thing. And so this can either mean yu'minu, so believe in me. That's literally meaning believe in me. But the nuances of that is either give your trust over to Allah, okay, and that's the nature of the dua, is that you make that request and then you're throwing it out to something beyond yourself, because you realize that you are powerless. You realize that you are unable to achieve things by yourself, and so you throw it out to something beyond yourself. That's the nature of dua. And he says, وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي, so either to put it as a trust or to acquire peace and tranquility through Allah. That's the two different meanings. You either put this trust in Allah that He will answer the dua, or you're going, and this is a very similar meaning, or you strive to achieve tranquility through me. Okay, which is similar. When you throw that trust, you obviously got to have that. You're not afterwards. You're in a state of anxiety. Is it going to be tended to? Rather, you feel that peace of heart that it will be tended to. These are the nuances of وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا. What's interesting here is that Allah says, so respond to me and believe in me. And you think you need belief first before you respond, because response is an action, like prayer, doing things. And all acts of worship are conditional on you having belief. And so the scholars mean here is persevere in belief. Because the nature is, what's the nature of dua? When you make dua, so we've got two possible meanings here. You make dua, okay, and then you do actions in order for that to be achieved. Okay, that's one, as we said, that's one possible meaning. I've lost my chain of thought now. So we said, so either it means you respond through action, and notice also, sorry, I missed this, is that look at ujibu. Ujibu means answer, Allah, and it means simply answer, very quickly and with ease. فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا is more emphatic. So Allah is saying, from me, I will make it easy, the answer. From you, you've got to strive. Okay? But once you strive, I will simply give it to you. Okay? So from Allah, it's ujibu. From the servant, it's فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا. Okay? It's much more emphatic. So do something for me, and I will do it for you. Okay. Allah says in another verse, "Ud'uni astajib lakum." So call on me and I will answer you. And he uses a 10th form here, astajib, from yastajib, same form instead of ujib. Okay, and that's probably to give more emphasis in that moment. Don't have doubt that I will answer. Okay. Here he uses ujibu for Allah, but for the servant, falyastajibu, which is interesting. So when one makes the dua, they have to, it's conditional belief, but then it's easy for people to lose faith once they've made the dua if they don't see an instant answer, or they're waiting and the time's elapsed and they haven't seen any fruits of their dua. So Allah, meaning persist in belief in me that I will do. And that's one of the conditions of dua, that you have this faith that it will be answered. Okay, and so that's why that comes afterwards. And then Allah says, لَعَلَّهُمْ, perhaps that they may, and we said that لَعَلَّ gives hope. Okay, وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا, persist in this dua and persist in faith that it will be answered, so that they will يَرْشُدُونَ. Okay, so see the things that we've covered so far. We've seen يَشْكُرُونَ, okay, and we've seen تَتَّقُونَ, and now we've got يَرْشُدُونَ. So taqwa's first, this sense of awareness of God, and in our interactions, and then yashkurun, the sense of gratitude in our hearts, and yarshudun. This is from Rashin Dal, and rushd is very similar to huda, which we've seen mentioned. Allah says, "Shahru Ramadan alladhi unzila fihi al-Quran hudan lin-nas." That the month of Ramadan is the month in which the Quran was revealed as a guidance for people. Huda means guidance, i.e., you're looking for something and then you find it. Rushd, which is another word for guidance, means when you have the guidance, after you've achieved the guidance, you know how to implement it. It's the practice of the guidance. And so you have the book, but can you actually put it into practice? And rushd is about being solid, being intelligent, being able to carry out your tasks properly. These are the nuances of rushd. And notice Allah uses a verb here. We've got the ya with the prefix, so that's third person, and they've got the wow, and then notice masculine plural. And so it means perpetually, because this requires, as you're doing this, what's going to happen? This is what's so beautiful. You make the dua to Allah, and then you have faith that it's definitely going to be answered. But in that فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا, you're searching for it. Okay, you're seeking it out. Okay, so that was where I lost my chain of thought. You respond to Allah through actions, or you seek out Allah's answer. That's another possibility, and that requires rushd. You're searching for it, the guidance there, and then how to actually implement it as well. This is the nature of how we make dua, and of course, fasting is a way to do this. If you wish something to be answered, you fast, because it puts you into a state of consciousness of Allah. It puts you in a state of desperation for Allah. It puts you in a state of cautiousness about in your relationship with Allah. So let me just make sure I've covered. I said فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا implies faith, but this is a different kind of faith, as I have mentioned. And so Allah in these verses has affirmed His closeness, and He has affirmed that He will answer the call of the servant, and then He commands that they hold firm to what they are upon. These are the three things that are established in this verse in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And notice that Allah loves to be asked, despite Him being the supreme, despite Him being absolute, and there's no one beyond Him in station. Usually you'd think that someone like a king, that we would have to come to Him. But Allah is saying, I am here for you. Okay? And I'm here at any time and any place. Usually if someone's of a higher rank than you, you're the one that has to chase them up. But Allah is saying, I am here present for you at any time to ask me. Okay? And also that Allah's the reason that this verse has come about in these verses is because the prayer of the faster is a special prayer, and we know that it's the prayer that specifically just before breaking your fast. This is a special time of du'a. I remember when I was in Medina, and people were sitting there waiting to break their fast in Masjid Nabawi, and a man said, "Stop reading Quran, stop talking, stop doing dhikr, call upon Allah. This is the time when Allah answers." Okay. Also, the beginning of the verse could imply that there's fear, i.e. Allah is close, so watch out. But then the second part of the verse affirms that it's about hope, this verse. So that's another thing that's highlighted here. The Sahal ibn Abdullah Tustari, he mentions 7 conditions of prayer. He says there must be humility before something be above you. There must be a sense of fear and trepidation, expectation, but fear that maybe it might not be answered. But get alongside that the hope that you will be answered. So this balancing between fear and hope. The persistence in the dua. Some of the scholars have mentioned that it's better for your dua to be general, i.e. not just for yourself but for others. And some have mentioned that it be just general. But there are times when dua needs to be specific because it has more need. When you have a specific need, eating the lawful, and that can be monetarily or through food, and then presence of heart, salat on the Prophet ﷺ, and choosing specific times such as the last portion of the night if you really want your dua. Another interesting thing is that dua. Some of the scholars said it's not talking about dua here. It's actually talking about ibadah, worship. I accept the worship of the worshipper. And so you strive and do what you can, and I will accept it. That's another interpretation, showing that we do what we can. That's the most important thing. Not that we be perfect, but we at least try our best with what's within our capacity, with the hope that Allah will actually accept that. And that this is also beautiful. I find this, and I'm becoming more conscious of this in my days, is that this relationship that we've got, that we have the ability to throw something out to something beyond ourselves, this ultimate power, is such a therapeutic practice. And just sensing that you've got someone there for you is a real resource for us in our days. And that's what's the gift, one of the main gifts of prayer. There's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, "My people have been given 3 things that only prophets were given before." And one of them is that God said to any prophet He sent, "Call him in and will answer you." Specifically for a prophet. But here, our ummah has been given it for us directly. Allah has said, "Ujibu da'wat da'i idha da'an, falyastajibu li." And then He says directly to us, "Udu'uni, call me." Not to the prophet, but for us. "Udu'uni astajib lakum." I will specifically, personally answer that. The other one is that I have not placed, that He said specific to the prophets, "I have not placed any hardship upon you." And now He's given that for us, it was given to the whole ummah. And that the prophets, the third point is that the prophets were a witness over their nation, and we, along with our prophet, will be a witness and bear testimony if any of the previous nations try to deny their prophets, and we will testify on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of Yawm al-Qiyamah. And we have another beautiful hadith here where Allah says, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man futi lahu fi du'a," whoever has been opened the door to du'a, then he has been given the doors to answer. And this is an important thing. It's not about our prayers being answered necessarily. It's that Allah has inspired us to ask Him. That's a beautiful thing, just in its sense. And so that if we are regularly inspired to call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is that Allah wants to give us anyway. That's the greatest gift, that we have this connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, why sometimes aren't prayers answered? He says, Al-Qurtubi says in this, that's because sometimes we persist in enormities. And sometimes it's because we oppress others and violate others' rights. So if we want our prayers answered, it's important that we focus on trying to clean up our acts and make sure we rectify our relationships with people, and we don't have real resentment in our hearts towards others. As I said, we try our best to do that if we want our prayer to be answered. And one of the last points is one of the major etiquettes of dua is that you don't say, and this is very common in our community, is that, for example, I say to something, so I say to someone, "May Allah give you that," and they say, how do they respond? They say, "Insha'Allah." Now, the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith of Bukhari that Allah loves to be asked and is always present. Okay, and but don't say Insha'Allah. Allah doesn't like us to say Insha'Allah, because if you're a beggar, say you're begging and you're holding on to someone, please help me, if you wish. That shows that there's a lack of real desperation, and so it's the scholars mention it's actually disliked for you to say Insha'Allah in a dua. There are some exceptions to that, where you're just making tafa'ul, you're making having a good omen of something. So someone's sick, you say, their bat's tahurun, Insha'Allah. May it be a purification for you, Insha'Allah, if God wills. There are some du'as the Prophet ﷺ seemed to accept that, but in most situations, if someone says to you, "May Allah bless you," what's the response? The response is that you say, "Ameen," or "May Allah make your affair easy." Not to say Insha'Allah, but to say Ameen to that, because you're desperate for that dua to be answered. Okay? So that wraps up this verse, and now we're going to go into more legal issues in the verse to come, which Insha'Allah we will resume tomorrow.